Thank you very much to soprano Michelle Aaron and pianist Margaret Greenspan. I'm Diane Sare, an independent LaRouche candidate for U.S. Senate in 2022, and this is the New York Symposium. And this is the first symposium of the year 2022, so I think that song is particularly appropriate because this must be the year that everything changes and in a direction much for the better. Before I introduce our guests, let me just say a few things. Uh, 2022 actually is the 100-year anniversary of the birth of the great American genius and statesman Lyndon LaRouche, and his widow, Helga Zepp LaRouche, has proposed that this year, 2022, be the year of LaRouche, which is highly appropriate given that he should have been president of the United States had there not been an outrageous witch hunt and legal persecution resulting in his unjust incarceration for 5 years and the economic policies which he fought for his entire life, namely to eradicate poverty worldwide and to create a condition where humanity continued to advance from one generation to the next, uh, with the United States playing a very crucial role, which is, in a sense, our birthright given our revolution against the British Empire. That was not to come into being. And we have had, as a result of his forecasts and policies not being followed, a hideous collapse into exactly the kind of crises that he warned about, including pandemics, which he said were inevitable if you had economic policies that lowered the standard of living, lowered energy flux density, so that you're putting people in situations where it's a natural breeding ground for disease. And this is not a new idea. Thomas Malthus of the British East India Company, which probably killed about 80 million people over its century or so reign in India through starvation. Malthus actually said that the world is overpopulated. Now, this was in the late 1700s, mind you. The world is overpopulated, and what we should really do is instead of trying to cure diseases, we should court the return of the plague by having people live next to swamps, putting them in overcrowded conditions, etc., not giving them adequate nutrition. So, in other words, all of the causes of disease were already known, which means there really is no reason at this late date for there to be pandemics because we should have eradicated the conditions which lead to them. Now, we'll get to that in a minute with my guests from the New York Public Schools and from NYCHA, but I just want to also situate where we are. Number one, there is a hideous crime against humanity unfolding in Afghanistan, and I would really like my listeners to reflect on the idea that the policy of the United States is uniform. Our foreign policy is a mirror of our domestic policy. Our domestic policy is a mirror of our foreign policy. So in Afghanistan, which we occupied for at least 20 years, if you don't include the 1980s when we were running a proxy war against the Soviet Union, so I guess you could say 40 years. But the occupation since 9/11 led to a 40-fold increase in the production of opium and heroin, making Afghanistan the number one producer of opium in the world at the time that we left. We left the country rather abruptly, and not only that, we froze the funds of the Afghan government using the pious argument that we didn't like the Taliban, and therefore the $9 billion in the Afghan central bank would be held, in most of it in the New York branch of the Federal Reserve. Since Afghanistan existed prior to our exit on 75% of their income came from foreign aid. If you suddenly cut that off, what do you expect you're going to get? And what we've gotten is 2,500 hospitals and clinics have shut down, and 23 million people are faced with starvation in the very near term over the winter, including 3 million children under the age of 5. 80% of the population of this country is under the age of 30. So it actually has a great potential to completely change and play a very productive role in the world, but not if we impose these kind of brutal policies. Imagine 23 million people starving to death, and this is not even discussed here. So that is not different than the kind of policies we have in the United States, which we'll be hearing about. Also, people may have heard about the situation in Kazakhstan, where you had the beginnings of a colored revolution, just like you had in Ukraine, where Victoria Nuland of the Obama administration where the U.S. Spent $5 billion overthrowing the elected government, putting in through violence a pro-Nazi regime that was killing people who spoke Russian, Jews, everyone else who idolized Stepan Bandera, who collaborated with Adolf Hitler, leading to Crimea actually rejoining the Russian Federation. It was not occupied, but a terrible situation. And in Ukraine, as a result of this, the standard of living and the standard of production has also collapsed. Well, there's been a move to do something similar in Kazakhstan. People probably heard suddenly a tax was placed on oil. The price doubled. There were demonstrations, and suddenly the demonstrations got overtaken by people wanting to do violence. The president of Kazakhstan said, "We are not going to tolerate terrorism. These people clearly are trained." And I could go through the figures, but it was thousands of people injured, 18 police officers killed, hundreds of cars and vehicles set on fire. Russia was requested to send troops, which they have done. For the moment, things look like they may be calming down, but such are the times we're living in. We're on the cusp of a very important discussion between the United States and Russia, between the permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council, about actually taking steps to pull us back from the brink of nuclear war, and someone launches a provocation. And then yesterday, we were treated to non-ending hysteria about the events of January 6th. And we have a new strain of the coronavirus, Omicron, which appears to be less lethal, but it's highly contagious. And the problem is that when you have very large numbers of people, in one day we had over 1 million new cases in the United States. So even though perhaps a smaller percentage of people need to be hospitalized, because it's so many at once, what you discover is we overwhelm our hospital and healthcare system. And Jose Vega, who is doing the AV for us this evening, had a quite horrifying experience taking his grandfather to the emergency room. Another supporter told me about his experience in the emergency room, where the healthcare workers are just being pushed over the edge by the conditions that they're being put under because they have not been backed up with adequate resources and staffing. Now, Lyndon LaRouche was a great student of Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who 400 or so years ago in the 1600s made certain crucial breakthroughs in science and philosophy. But one of the beliefs that he demonstrated to be true is he said that God would not create evil. This is a controversial point. God created the best of all possible worlds. And people would say, well, how can you say that when evil happens? And Leibniz said, because every evil which occurs presents us with the opportunity, with the potential to do a greater good. And therefore, God continues to be perfect, and man, through his free will, has the opportunity to choose to do the good and to bring the good into being. So I say that to preface this discussion, because what we're about to hear in terms of the situation, the lack of preparedness during this pandemic and this overall economic collapse, seems quite horrible, and the way the media plays things, I think it's designed to make people terrified and hysterical. But the truth of the matter is, all of these problems can actually be solved. The solutions aren't terribly complicated in some cases, but it would require a dramatic shift in the way that people think and in the policies of our government. So, with that being said, let me just say that tonight we'll have with us Corrine, who is a New York public school teacher. Glad to see you there.
Well,
Dennis Speed, who is my co moderator, who chairs the LaRouche Manhattan Project, and Carmen Quinones, who's there somewhere, who is the president of the Douglas Houses Tenants Association, NYCHA, on the Upper West Side. And I think what I'll do right now is just turn it over to Corrine to give us a report on what's been happening in the public schools and your
hello.
direct experience.
Hi, guys. So I am a special education teacher. I teach students with severe disabilities in a District 75 school, moderate to severe disabilities. So I've been working with the DOE for over 6 years. This is my sixth year, sorry. And there are a lot of things that we are being told in the news that are actually not happening in our schools, at least in not my school and the schools that I know about. Based on my friends who are also teachers. We share some of the same issues where they're um, checking the ventilators, the vents, but there's not enough air going in and out the classroom. So what we've been having to do is we have been opening our windows. We've been provided with air purifiers. At least each classroom has gotten 2 air purifiers, but we have had to open our windows based on the fact that it's sometimes hot and we're not getting enough air flowing in and outside the room. We are one of the most important things, which I think we needed help with, we didn't get, was working on our tap water systems. Our schools have tap water faucets that are over 50 years old. So, an issue, especially for my students which I will make you aware of how my students function. Some of them are severely disabled where they're not able to close their jackets. They have poor function for their hands, so they're not able to zip up their jackets. They can't turn on a tap water. So in our schools, in the school that I am, our taps, you have to press on them, right? And when you take your hand off, the water stops. So in between you pressing on the taps, by the time you put your hand under it, the water's gone in a matter of seconds. So that's one of the things, where I feel like we've been lacking a lot of the infrastructures that have been over 50 years old in our schools that have not been addressed. And if we're telling our students and staff that we have to be safe, I'm expected to teach my students to turn a tap on, not to press down on the tap and then try to catch the water before it actually stops working. So we've been having that issue because we have our students who don't know how to even cover their faces when they sneeze. So when they use the bathroom, whatever it is, whatever germs that they have in the bathroom, we have to trust that they were able to properly use the faucets, which we highly doubt. So even with the help of staff, it sometimes is um, very hard. And so we find that when they come back into the classroom, we have to do like a double or a triple sanitation process for our staff and our students. And in the beginning of the school year, we had very little supplies. I did not get my supplies until more than a month after school started. So I was told there are no supplies available. And I had to wait. I had to get supplies outside of school. And as a lot of teachers had, some got, some did not get. And so we had to provide our own. as best as we could for our students. We got masks, and we were told that one mask has to serve you for 3 days. And so for us in District 75, it was an insult, because when everyone else was home, when the pandemic just happened, when everyone else was home in, doing remote, our teachers and our students in District 75, one of the most crucial and one of the most vulnerable populations, we were sent out into the schools without proper supplies and without proper support and without any changes, except for the classroom was said that, they said that the classrooms were being cleaned. I don't know how often it was. I don't think it was not as often as every single day. We were very short staffed. We still are short staffed, where our students who need health and crisis paraprofessionals, they're without it. So legally, we're running illegally right now. But they're not explaining that within our schools. They're not saying what's happening. Cases are not being reported to parents. I've been sick twice. I just got COVID again within the space of in less than 2 months, because of my exposure to schools. And my husband is also a teacher. And so it's an insult. I really feel like we've been sent out to die. Um, and we are the last of the ones who are really being helped. The hospitals, they're getting what they need to get. But at the end of the day, when everything else is shut down, our schools are what they are fighting to keep open, but they're not providing us with what they need. So it's very concerning for our staff and for our students. A lot of us are ready to walk out. A lot of us are ready to give up. And when that time comes, I do believe it's going to come, because now we are being told we don't have a choice. We can't even go remote. We are being told after 5 days we have to come back in. I have multiple staff and students that are coming back to work sick, as per the CDC rules and as per the DOE new guidelines. And so we see our cases in the schools, they're multiplying day by day, and they're not being reported. I'm not the only teacher who has been saying it. Cases have not been reported. The staff that's been exposed, they're not being made alert. And so it's very concerning. Very concerning, because I don't think we can get to the root of the problem until we actually make a change and we have people on the ground who are helping our staff and students. Our students can't advocate for themselves. My students are not, some of them can't even speak. So to know that they come to school and they're stuffy, they have a runny nose, they're sneezing, they're put into a room. We have our overcrowded classrooms. They're put into a situation room where they're isolated, but it's a problem, because now everybody's been exposed. And so it's very sad and concerning, as I said, and I don't have a lot of hope in whatever's happening with who are our people in office. I'm very disappointed, quite frankly. Our teachers are very disappointed. We're not being represented. The kids are not being represented. And we don't want to hear that, you guys care for the children. We want to see it. We want to see our schools being fixed. We want our 50-year-old vents and bathrooms. Our bathrooms are bathrooms for elementary school students. Our staff is using those bathrooms where you can't even properly use the things that are there, much less our students. They are not supplied properly. So I think our government needs to really take a step back and actually not be so focused on money, because at the end of the day, we don't want to wait till our students and our staff start dying. And I'm not being nice about it, but maybe that's what you guys are waiting on. And I guess when we start dying, then our government will really care. But we have no hope in our government until we see a change. We have no hope until our funding goes back into schools for our students and our staff, where our staff aren't outside trying to get funding just for supplies, just to get proper things in our classroom that really help our staff and students. Because at the end of the day, we are the ones who are in one-to-one contact, not the principals, not the administrators. The staff and students, our assistant teachers and our teachers, and the students and parents who are not being made aware of the situations that are happening. So I'm not sure if you have any questions for me, Diane, but I'm definitely more than welcome to answer.
Yes, I think we will. And actually, I'm really glad to hear this report because one of my campaign organizers told me that they had been in touch with a Facebook group of teachers in Long Island. And the teacher said, well, is Diane Sare a teacher? And she said, well, no, she's not. She's a choir director. And one of the people responded, well, if she's not a teacher, she can't possibly understand what we're going through. And then another person who is a music teacher said, well, if she's a choir director, she can understand. but um, but they had the same thing. We really want to hear. Now, I see Carmen has joined us, and I think she heard you. And I think what we're going to do is go to her to report on the situation there in NYCHA, and then Dennis may have some things to say, and then we can have a discussion, take questions, etc. And before I go on, I forgot to say my disclaimer, as always, is that participation in the Sare for Senate Symposium does not mean that people are endorsing my candidacy or any candidacy. It does not mean that I agree necessarily with the views expressed here, although often I must say I do. But I'm doing this because we have to have a dialogue of the major issues that are life and death that are facing people. And if we only think we can talk to people we agree with or discuss things we already know, we're not going to get anywhere. So with that, let me hear from Ms. Quinones at the Douglas Houses.
First, let me say Happy New Year's to everybody. I'm still exhausted from yesterday, but it's heartbreaking just hearing you describe what's happening in the schools. Um, of course, being on the ground, I know most of the stuff that's happening because I think everybody keeps saying she says the same thing over and over and over again. I have 19 grandkids and 13 great grand. Most of my grandchildren are in college, but most of my great grand are in school. And if we don't get this together, it'll never be together. I am praying that this mayor makes a bigger difference. Um, but it's really up to us. All this is really up to us. It's up to the parents. It's up to the grandparents, uncles, aunt. It's up to us. We can't depend on government to do anything for us. That's just the bottom line. They prove it over and over. You talked about that ventilation system. How long has that been going on? Years, ages, fighting for the same thing. Everything that you have discussed, we've been fighting for over and over and over again. In housing over here in New York City Housing Authority, it's just a mess. I mean, a mess. I had one caretaker for 19 buildings. Most of them were out for COVID. Then I got a phone call that the supervisor of maintenance was also out. We couldn't have anybody come and help because all of the developments are going through the same thing. We have trash, we have everything. So, that's why I'm imploring people with resident management. We have to take over our own uh, buildings and we have to take care of our own homes. Again, everything comes back to us. It doesn't matter who we put in office, who we run, because it goes back to the same thing. I've been in this business 37 years. Been a Democratic district leader, state committee one, ran for assembly, just finished running for council. I mean, it's horrible. It is horrible. They have such a clang in politics that it's crazy. And our voting rights are being violated every day more and more. You know, um, It seems like the fix is in. The wealthier they are and the more power they have, they keep people from voting. You know, the only way to do is a revolution. People need to get out in the street and start the same way we went out for Trump. Well, why don't you go out and protect your home? Why don't you go out and protect your children? That's what we need to be rallying and marching about. Because at this state and this time, we're all gonna die. Not some of us, all of us, if we don't take care of ourselves. It is up to us to get this done. Um, I don't see no other way. I really don't. I try. I've for 37 years. I've been trying. What else is there? You're sending our children to doomsday in these schools. You're literally don't care if you kill our kids. That's a problem for me because I love my grandkids and I love my great grandkids, and I'll be damned if I'm gonna let somebody hurt them. But at this point, let me tell you something. My granddaughter went to school because she was having her daughter was having problems. Milani's the sweetest little thing. She's 12 years old, and they told her that she couldn't come in if she wasn't vaccinated. They had just finished stating that the kids 12 and under, they can get vaccinated. Fine, we have no problem with that. But you're also making sure that 5-year-olds, these people cannot go to school. They will call BCW on these parents. This is not the way to mandate vaccinations. You got to come out with something a little better and respect people, because you can't just talk to parents any old way. You want them to get vaccinated? Well, you know what? Let's find a way so that people could do what they want. And if they don't want to get vaccinated, guess what? That's their prerogative. You can't keep taking our rights away. Freedom of speech, freedom of nothing. We have freedom of nothing. Because right now, it's a demand. I'm 62 years old. How you going to demand me to do something? Really? Really? You don't know my health. You don't know what I'm going through. You don't know if I can or I cannot get the vaccination. There are different situations for different folks. Why don't you try finding out what's wrong with people before you mandate them? You can't tell people what to do. That's the first thing that's going to happen. I don't think so. Because nobody likes to be told what to do. Why don't you advise people why they should, how they should, and gear them into it? Everything is about educating. Educate people. A lot of people are not, especially young parents, a lot of them are not educated enough to know what's right and what's wrong. I deal with people every day, 3,000 people every day. I'm the president of Douglas 19 building. I got 3,000 different characters, different people with different problems. They all cannot fit in the same scenario. Sorry, they can't. And we have to do better. We have to first learn how to respect people, and to put God in your life. Because if you had God in your life, you wouldn't be doing all these demands and all this stuff that you guys are doing, especially all these elected officials. And to tell you the truth, I just don't understand this. You get vaccinated, you go for the first vaccination, you go for the second vaccination. Now they want you to have a booster. Now they're talking about a fourth one, but you still get COVID. So, see, if I'm thinking like that, imagine how many other people are thinking like that. When they took that shot, it's because they knew that they were going to be safe. And that is not the case. So, you know what? Give a little bit more information on why this is happening, because none of them, and I'm talking about none of these doctors are God. None of them. And you don't know what people have. I'm just so tired. Literally, I look tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of the BS that people are trying to give you. when we are all grown and demand some respect. We championed at 7 o'clock, especially Douglas. I never seen anything so beautiful at 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, people were out their windows downstairs, and we were clapping and we were doing everything. And now the same people that were saving our lives, you have no respect for. So explain to me. I can't get it. I can't get it. And I'm into politics. I'm into it all. And I just can't get it. And I'm not gonna go on because I can go on for days. I tell you the truth, because I am just so disgusted. And I'm disgusted with every party. Because actually, this should be the people's party. That's what we need to do. We need to do a people's party. Somebody that really cares. Diane, thank you so much for having this panel. We need this because people need to see real people. Because people see right through you now. People ain't trying to hear that. People ain't playing none of this. People see right through the phoniness. And this is why panels like this should be everywhere. And get down to really what's happening. I mean, in New York City housing now, they fired the general manager. Now we're getting one of his name is Sharad. He's from HUD, the previous administration, and they believe in RAD. They believe in PAC. They believe in privatizing. You know how many people are going to be homeless? Just right now. They stopped the extension on getting your rent paid. You know how many people are going to be homeless? I mean, let's get real, y'all. There are bigger things to really worry about. And nobody, they're not hitting it. They're not hitting it. We're hitting it. We're hitting it. But we're a few. So we need to find out what else we can do to get more of us on this panel. And whatever you need, Diane, I am here. Any one of y'all, whatever you need, I am here. I will start inviting people if you give me the give me the okay. I'll bring people on that think like us. But we gotta get it together. Because our people are dying in record numbers, and it seems like nobody really cares. And there's just no respect. No respect and no morals. I grew up with morals, values. We don't know that anymore. If you don't teach it to your kids, they don't know it. But I'm really, 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 I'm tired. Mama, 37 years in this run, I'm tired. I'm even tired of being president. Because it doesn't matter what you do, it's just never, never, never enough. So where do we go? What do we do? I think this panel is important, and I think we need to get more people on it. And the more we can do that, I think the better it is. But we need real people that are not going to take the BS.
I agree.
Thank you for this time. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And by the way, you did a wonderful job yesterday. That program was so tremendous. And all the young people that are clearly under your leadership, I actually think that you're probably the person who runs the 24th police precinct.
Yes, I do.
From what I there. And that's very good. Well, that's the kind of cooperation we need. But Dennis, go ahead.
Well, I have a few questions. Ms. Cornelis, I want to ask you a couple of questions. You said that you've been doing this for 37 years.
Yes.
So that means you've been doing this since the age of 25.
You got it, baby. Mm-hmm. I started off with Reverend Al Sharpton. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Why'd you do it?
The passion. My grandmother actually was the captain of Tenant Patrol, so I grew up in it. And my grandmother was, oh my God, a rebel with a cause. She would slap you with her pocketbook in a minute. But I grew up in politics, and she always told me, if you don't like something, don't eat it. And so I think I grew into it that way. My first thought was actually with Reverend Al Sharpton. I've been there since I was young, and I kept going from there. Then I got into I became the chief of staff of, I don't know if you remember him, but Assemblyman Angelo Del Toro. Um, so I come from there. I was the chief of staff for there for a long time. I became a district leader. And then from there, I started working for Olga Mendez. I don't know if you remember her, but it was East Side. I come from the East Side, 116th Street and Madison Avenue. And so from there, I just kept going and kept going, and I'm still here. And I just believe that, and I still believe, I believe we can change it. I just believe that we need to get rid of the riffraff, get rid of the gang mentality that's in politics. It's been looming too long. The only I've seen a lot of people pass, and that's almost like a way that you can only get rid of them, and that's sad. Um, I just think we really need to um, just get real. Call them out when they're not doing anything. And I think that's why I really don't have too many elected officials that like me a lot, because when they do something wrong, I'm right there. I don't believe I stopped working for elected officials a long time ago. Angelo passed away. That was it for me. And I said no, because even when I worked for him, and I was I think it was 28, right? And I told him, I challenged him. I said, I want to be district leader. And he said, you can't. I said, why? And he told me, he says, because Bilal is the district leader and she belongs to us. So, that's when I knew of a clang, right? And I said, wow. Then Angelo de Toro finally died and I ran. I said, he ain't here no more. I respected the man, but I'm running because I don't like what y'all do. I don't like what they do. And I ran and I became the Democratic district leader. And so I've been there since.
All right, so let me say something now, having heard what you said about that concerning New York City and the issue of how to organize in New York City. Some of us have some background in it. In my own case, I first began doing things in New York City when I was 25 years old, in 1977. It was April of 1977 when I was 24. My birthday was later on that year. There's a year of the Son of Sam. That was the year of Studio 54. It was a year of New York Yankees winning the World Series. A lot of things happened that year. It was a year of the blackout. It's a year of the riot, and during the blackout, call it that. And it was a year in which people thought about New York City being in complete chaos. After trying to do a few things in New York City for about 2 years, I realized that I knew less about the city after 2 years than I knew when I first got there. So I went and saw someone who's now deceased, whose 115th birthday would have been on December 29th. His name was Hewlin Jack. Hewlin Edwin Jack. He was the first African American elected in any northern city other than Dawson from Chicago and Powell, but those were federal positions. But in terms of a city position, he was the first person elected. It was back in 1957, and he became borough president of Manhattan. He was part of what then was a machine, Tammany Hall. And his mentor, Carmen DeSapio, who was the head of Tammany Hall, used to be called the Tiger, set up a certain system, which was the district leader system, of course, which existed, but then there were the county committees, and they created a certain circumstance where you had to represent some section of New York, and you had to give people an idea of inclusion, of involvement. But you had to do activity, and you had to be accountable to people in your area. Now, that system, of course, has radically eroded, and as a consequence of its radical erosion, basic elements of urban life are no longer in place for the citizens that live there. Their lives are essentially very much like a kind of jungle crapshoot. It's a combination of sort of being if Las Vegas were in the middle of the Amazon, and you're trying to win at a crap table that is next to a lake of piranhas. Where we are now in terms of what needs to be done, it seems to me, you already said a few things about it. Citizens committees around public health in particular need to be created. New York City actually has a lot of the old structure is sort of still there in terms of the county committee structure, and the district leader structure doesn't get used much because, of course, the present Democratic Party has no accountability whatsoever. And the Republican Party tends to be non-existent in at least in a lot of New York. Some places it exists a little bit more. But neither one of them really has any essential accountability because of the Board of Estimate, the charter rather, being changed back in the 1990s. The power of the borough presidents has eroded, and the power of the citizens to appeal to that whole structure got eroded. And I mentioned Hewlin Jack because when I went and talked to him, he described all this to me. He told me what this was. He told me how it worked. He told me that the idea was that you had to have citizens who were accountable, and they were organized according to these party clubs sort of structure. But this is a party structure. Now, we're in a different situation right now. I mean, we had a pandemic. Don't have a lot of time to put a whole thing like that together. But you have a crisis in which, as was said by Corrine earlier in her description, people have the sense that they're being sent off to die. Now, some people who signed up as teachers realized that in one sense they were doing missionary work anyway. That's very much true of people that go into the teaching profession, I think. Not that they want to be put in harm's way, but that they do have a sense that this is a mission. They don't do it for the pay, that's for sure. But this is different because, as you already said, Ms. Quinones, you were very clear about the conflicting signals, matter of fact, conflicting directives that have come. Now, Diane, and I should also say to everybody that's watching, we have to petition to get Diane on the ballot. We should come back to that a little bit and talk about that. A lot of unfairness in the law, but just to bring it back to both questions and a little bit more discussion, because we got a couple questions that came in about the situation in the schools, and I want to make sure I ask those. But just to say in terms of what I think may make sense, and I'm going to say this carefully, but I believe this can happen. There's something called the Committee for the Coincidence of Opposites. This is a group of, doctors and other concerned people, which was co-founded. One of the co-founders was Dr. Jocelyn Elders, former Surgeon General of the United States. Helga Sepp-LaRouche of the Schiller Institute was the other person that co-founded it, and a couple of other people, including prominent medical personnel, have joined this committee. And one of the things that the committee has talked about is that there needed to be an in-depth, top-down, bottom-up discussion with people about the nature of the coronavirus process and the nature of the public health process that we need. Because, as you already said, Ms. Quinones, it's way different depending on who you're talking to, depending on what kind of situation you're in. The urban situation is not the same as the rural situation. Certainly the situation of the poor is not the same as the situation of affluent communities, even though the disease is the same. And I wonder if you think, and then I'll go to some of these questions, but I want to put one question to you, Ms. Quinones, and I want the other questions to go to our representative from the education field, Corrine. I wonder what you would think about the possibility of pulling together I don't know if it would probably be a virtual meeting, probably have to be, of something like, like the housing process unit you're part of, or something like that, or some other form of organization where somebody like that just decided they're going to take all afternoon, right, and answer all the questions that they can answer and collect questions that they can answer in order to actually have a report back also to the people with answers. Because obviously the concern people now have is, well, if we're getting conflicting messages, even if we decide that we're going to agree with the institution that's giving out the conflicting messages, we have to deliver those messages to people who are going to be conflicted. So now, how are we going to even do that, even if we agree to that? let alone how we're going to do the right thing. The right thing being, let's actually break this out. Let's tell people what the truth is. Let's tell them what we know, what we don't know. Let's give them an idea why these procedures must be maintained. But more importantly, coming back to the actual infrastructure situation, the actual physical situation, what is actually needed to do this? You mentioned or referenced the idea of a revolution. This is something that people like myself and others who came along in the 1970s, the early 70s, this was a premise of our political activity, was that that was going to be needed. And we didn't mean something that had to be violent. It did have to be very vigorous because we could see that we weren't going to get people's attention or that they would basically not do what they said they were going to do. But coming back to, let's take it as the immediate circumstance, which has been very clearly stated. There were a couple of questions to our teacher, and I want to just say what they were as I got them. Some people have been texting me instead of the other way, because they know me and they could do it. So one question was, what you're describing is the schools in conditions for COVID to spread like crazy. Right now, the official figure for New York City schools is 97,000 cases since September up to now. Do you think that's accurate? And if not, how inaccurate is it? I don't think you have to have a figure for that. I realize you may not have that figure. They just asked that. They wanted to know if Adams has shown any intention to address the problem you're describing, and then to what extent, if you would know, is the school in contact with local representatives? This really goes to what Ms. Quinones was saying and what these people are really saying about this. So let me pose it. So I think we got two questions. One, I'm to Ms. Quinones about this idea of this broader assembly and what kind of process we would have to do, since you have that whole district leadership background, how we ought to go about that. And then secondly, Karine, to you, those questions, and there will be some others. So maybe you should go first, Karine.
Okay. Yes. So for the numbers, I'm not sure, but I think it's very accurate and could be more, um, based on what's happening. I'm not sure how accountable our administrators are right now, and I'm not sure how I'm really not sure how accurate they're reporting the numbers, as I said before, because a lot of our staff and students and teachers are not being made aware of classes that are being closed or cases that are actually present in schools. We only know that someone disappeared for a few weeks and then they come back saying, oh yeah, I had COVID, and we weren't even made aware. Especially in the beginning, we were told that we don't have to know, um, based on what the protocol for what they're given. I'm not sure how it is for any other school. I can only speak from what I know. So I don't trust the numbers, to be quite honest. I hope it's not more, but I don't trust it. All I know is every day we're having 1, 2, 3, 4 cases popping up, in like on one site. And that's like for a staff or for a student. And then the whole class has to kind of be, the whole class has to be notified, and the parents, but that's it. Usually the staff has to come back the next day if they're fully vaccinated. So they're not being sent home to quarantine and to make sure that they are not showing symptoms within a few days. They're expected to show up the next day. So the numbers, as you ask, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but I don't trust the numbers. I don't trust what I'm being told until I actually see it and see, have some kind of accountability in our schools. And the second question I'd ask, can you just repeat that question?
Yeah, just give me a minute to get back to that.
Mhm.
Well, I think that what it was this idea about the officials. Let me just get back, so I'm seeing it
Okay.
here.
Like, what are they saying? Oh, Mr. Adams.
Yeah, Adams. Do you have a sense that he has any? Is he trying to relate? Actually, is he showing an
No,
intention to address the problem?
we are very onto staying aware of what's happening politically especially in terms of our school. One of the last conferences he stated that him and Michael Mulgrew, which is the U of T representative, he is at this point, I don't even acknowledge them much anymore, but they're saying that they're pretty much on the same wavelength, the same decision, and they have the same goal in mind to keep our schools open, right? Because based on what happened when the pandemic just started, where our students did not have proper internet to log into classes, and a lot of them were absent. That this is all we're hearing. A lot of them were absent, and a lot of students, wanted to commit suicide when they were home, and they faced a lot of depression. We were not hearing anything about, and I've been very up to date with listening to what he's been saying, because he was one of the persons I was looking for to really standing up and stepping in and actually making a change. We don't see anything in regards to our politicians. We don't see anybody coming in our schools on the ground. And if nobody's there, then all you're saying to me makes no sense. You're just doing what everybody else is doing. You're just coming to be politically correct, and you're just speaking so that you can sound proper and to sound like you're actually doing work that's making a difference. So I can't say for him if he has had any true records of what's happening, or has any on the ground workers to come into our schools and to actually look through our infrastructure and our protocol and see how things are. And I think those are things he should be speaking about, not just about opening our schools, because we all know what the true purpose of keeping our schools open. We all know it's for the money. It's not about our students, because I'd rather our students be at home than be in the hospital or be dead. I'd rather that than us talking about what's most important is about them learning right now. Yes, it is, but we're not hearing much of that from him. I know I have to give him time to come in, but based on what was there before, there's not much of a difference, but that they're all on one page and they're working to make sure staff and students are safe and given what we need. And that is not correct. We're not satisfied. We're not happy. Nothing has changed except that they gave us at-home tests. I just did an at-home test that they sent to me, and I tested negative on that test. And I got back my PCR the day after. I just went back into work because I was sick right before the break for COVID, followed the protocol, and came back into work positive with COVID. The at-home test that they gave me to take, it told me I was negative. I was sent home the day after with my PCR results on one of the DOE recommended sites. So until we see people coming into our schools and actually checking what's happening, and I don't want to just say principals, because at this point they're not really doing much either apart from what they're being told to do. I could be wrong, but I can only speak from what I'm seeing. But until we see people actually coming in, no, they're not doing anything but speaking from behind a desk or behind a podium. And that is useless. And they can just not say anything at all at that point.
Let me just ask before we go to Ms. Quinones, Diane, you want to respond to any of these things, or you want to just continue?
I have a lot to say, but why don't we go to Ms. Quinones first, and then I have several things.
What else I don't even know what else to say. My girl hit everything on the nose. We're going over it. It seems like we're just going in circles. I came up, in the revolution, and I just believe revolution is going to be needed. But I'm going to tell you, in order for us to do this, for me, it's just revolution. We just need to get people together, and we need to go out in the street. We need to do it like we did back in the days, not breaking stuff, none of that. We really need some real revolutionary people to come out and do this. This is personal to me. It's my kids and grandkids in these schools. I got cousins teachers, I got kids teachers. I mean, come on. This is personal. And when it gets personal, then it gets a little sticky for me. See, then I can't think of how political. There's no politically correct here. I I pray all day. I pray every day. You can ask Diane. I mean, my Three Kings,
Right.
man. All I had, all I had was my gospel music,
Yep.
because that's what we need to be teaching the kids. But we got to do something.
I-
I hope that we can
Okay.
get some people on the board.
Let me
Let's bring
restate the
some.
question for you. Let me restate the question for you. I'm saying something very specific. New York City has a structure which nobody uses, because you got to know how to organize to use it, which is why nobody uses it. And the structure involves
Something
this district leader and county committee district leader thing, which doesn't work for the parties because parties are no good. Parties aren't representing anybody. But it may be a way, and if not that structure, the point of the thing is we need to assemble people. We may only be able to do it virtually because of all the restrictions. But if you had or had knowledge that you had somebody like a former Surgeon General, somebody like that, who's prepared to talk to these people, well, somebody like, in other words, that has that kind of, right, that brings that to them.
Yeah.
Do you have a way, do you see a way that kind of a thing could be organized? Like for right now?
I really believe that I have very good connections, that see it the way I, see things the same way. Um, some that are in office already, and some that are not. But we have the people to get together to make this happen. One thing I'm good at, and one thing I'm very good at, is organizing. That's my kid piece. I can organize anything you need. I mean, I'm a consultant also. I've been consulting. I've been consulting campaigns for years. I've got elected the best. But right now, we really need to organize real people. I was in the Young Lords back in the days. So, we still have ties. I still have ties with all those people. We have ties with all kind of people that 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 were in the fight year, that really believe in what we're talking about, that believe in the just saving our children is enough.
Right.
They believe in that, and we need to get those people together. If you have my number, please call me. Whatever we need to do, I'll start getting together some of the Young Lords, some of my Black Panthers, old Black Panthers. But we need to do something. We need to do something.
Okay.
We need to bring it back.
Okay. Diane?
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that this whole situation is completely unacceptable, and it simply cannot be tolerated, and we will not survive. That's all. We just won't survive. Anyone who thinks they can survive in a society where you're throwing human beings on the scrap heap is sadly mistaken. And I think that people will reject it. The other aspect I wanted to add is, look, happily, the United States and Western Europe, where we really have taken a cultural and moral collapse, which is what's led to the economic collapse, is not the same direction of everything on the planet. One of the reasons why China is so vilified is that they decided to actually eradicate poverty. And in fact, the guy who wrote the book on the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, said, "Isn't it unfortunate that those things that people do to eradicate poverty are exactly what is destroying the environment?" So what you have coming from the billionaire bankers is that eradicating poverty is the enemy, and what they think needs to be done is to eradicate the population instead. And I think that most people on the planet actually do not intend to commit suicide. The people advocating depopulation maybe should lead the way. But we have to organize this. Now, I will also say that there is no substitute for government. The government has to function. The purpose of government is to promote the general welfare. It says that in our Constitution. If the government doesn't do that, then what you are calling for in terms of a revolution is what's advocated in our own Declaration of Independence, where they say if the government doesn't function under the consent of the government and uphold these needs, then it is our right, it is our duty to alter or abolish it. Now, our form of government is fine, it's brilliant, but it ceased to function because the government has the power to rein in BlackRock and Bill Gates and Bezos and all these other people who are destroying us. And I'll just give one example in terms of the way that elections are conducted. What Dennis was referring to, what people may or may not know, is that in the budget, they changed the practice for ballot access for non-Democrat or Republican candidates, i.e. non-establishment, independent voices. They changed it for parties like the Libertarian Party, the Green Party. It used to be 50,000 votes and you would get a party line. They changed it to 2% of the vote, which increased that to about 130 to 180,000 votes, which meant that those two parties lost their ballot status. An independent statewide candidate such as myself used to need 15,000 signatures to get on the ballot. Now it's 45,000 valid signatures to get on the ballot. They are making a big stink claiming that they want everybody to have the right to vote. Everybody, their mother, their aunt, and their ancestor who died in the American Revolution, and their dog and their cat will be able to vote multiple times, but there will be no one on the ballot for whom to cast your vote. That's what they intend to do. I think that people are angry enough that we can bust up the system. My campaign for Senate against Schumer is a vehicle for doing that. Now, what I further would like to do, and I asked Jose to pull this up because I think we've had so many years, we've really had decades since the assassination of President Kennedy, since the witch hunt that they ran against Lyndon LaRouche, and, you know, just various dishonest campaigns in the media. It's been a very long time. In fact, anyone who's really under the age of 60 probably can't imagine a time when we had a productive economy in this country where one person could work 40 hours a week, and that one income, 40 hours a week, was enough to support a family of 4, 5, or 6 people, take a vacation once a year, pay for your health insurance, your college tuition, and everything else. That seems unimaginable. Today, people have to move in with their parents. Parents have to move in with their children. You have multiple families under one roof. Your rent is over 50% of your income. This is all out of whack. Yet somehow during COVID, 500 people became billionaires. Now, the point of the government is that it has the power to bust up these monopolies and to put things under control. And I asked Jose to pull up this video. And if you'll bear with me, I really want people to watch this. It's 8 minutes long. It's what was done under FDR all simultaneously in New York City. And I would urge that, I know there are people watching from around the state. I saw a note from my friend Pat in Buffalo. I hope you're still on. Because this is exemplary of what Americans used to do. You have a problem and you muster your talent and you find the talent wherever it is and the will to work hard and you get the job done. If you think of the kind of repairs that are obviously needed in probably almost every public school in the city in terms of water, power, maintenance, what would be the workforce required to do that? The same thing with the NYCHA housing, for God's sakes, people without heat, people without proper ventilation. This all could be fixed and has to be fixed. So if you don't mind, Jose, I can't see everybody, but I guess you're giving us the okay to do this. You can scream and yell. If not, I want him to show this video and just think about what was going on and the fact it was happening simultaneously.
The metropolis of the Western world. To the visitor who comes by land, by air, or from the sea, a romantic panorama of towering spires and massive structures. A great city, a monument to man's imagination, testimony to his achievement. The home of 6 million people, it is also the financial and commercial capital of the entire world. Throughout the 5 counties which comprise New York City, evidence may be seen of the permanent improvements brought about by a great program which has removed thousands from relief roads. On Governor's Island, at the tip of Manhattan, important roads have been built and several buildings have been reconstructed. At the Brooklyn Navy Yard, a number of roads have been constructed and shops and warehouses are being built or improved. In this project, WPA labor is used and funds and materials are provided by the Navy Department. At Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn, improvements have been undertaken in which are combined many of the important features of the Works program. An area which was formerly undeveloped is the scene of a project in which employment is provided for both skilled and unskilled workers. A long bulkhead was built to reclaim land from the waters of the bay. The sanitary facilities of the area were greatly improved by the extension and reconstruction of sewers. A boulevard is being constructed on the new land filled in behind the bulkhead. As traffic in the city has become increasingly heavy, the streetcar lines in operation for years have given way to more flexible systems of transportation. In Manhattan alone, over 40 miles of track have been removed by WPA laborers. As part of an extensive park development program, 11 large swimming pools are being provided for public use, and completely equipped bathhouses are under construction to make the pools accessible to thousands of New Yorkers. The demolition of buildings along the path of the new East River Drive has been completed, and sewers, water mains, and electric conduits have been reconstructed. This project now continues with the construction of 2 3-lane highways flanked by broad sidewalks and landscaped parks. The program of civic improvement has been advanced by this project, which will provide a new traffic artery along the East River from Grand Street to 14th Street. Eventually, the drive will connect with the Triborough Bridge at 125th Street. The New York Public Library is one of the greatest collections of literary treasures in the world. When the imposing central branch was erected many years ago, it was provided with a copper roof, which has recently become dangerously corroded. The Works program has undertaken to construct a new roof of non-corroding metal and to rebuild the heating system as part of a project to repair and improve the building and its equipment. Extensive and important improvements have been made under the Works program at Floyd Bennett Airport on Jamaica Bay in Brooklyn. Air transport facilities have been increased with adequate provision for the largest land and seaplanes. Many novel devices, such as this ingenious turntable, have been provided, but most of the work has been basic construction. Machine shops have been constructed, the main heating plant was rebuilt, concrete runways were laid, and radio beacons and lighting facilities are being completed. New York City has never heretofore had a first-class airport which satisfied the requirements of the government for air, mail, and passenger use. When this project is finished, Floyd Bennett Airport will receive a Class A rating from the Department of Commerce. Air taxi service from Manhattan Island to Floyd Bennett and other airports in the metropolitan area has been made possible by the construction of 2 skyports on the East River. One is located at 31st Street and another at Wall Street. As an aid to city planning, a great-scale model of the metropolitan area is being constructed by architects, artists, professional workers, and technicians removed by WPA from relief rolls. In this model, built in cooperation with New York University, each individual building in Greater New York is reproduced in miniature. With this type of assembly, changes brought about by city development will be accurately reflected. Relief maps are also being made by the Cartographic Survey for educational use. In a federal art project, sculpture is being produced for schools and public buildings. Under the Works program, artists, actors, writers, and musicians contribute their share to the cultural development of the community. To make books more readily available, WPA has increased the staffs of free libraries. The highly specialized art of creating stained glass windows, mastered by a few artists in the world, is fostered by WPA in windows for the United States Military Academy at West Point. Here, too, a vast mural painting has been completed. The Works program has sponsored symphony orchestras and band concerts. Artists under the Works program make New York a better place in which to live. The Federal Theater Project, which has provided employment for hundreds of professionals, has produced a number of successful plays and entertainments. It has been repeatedly said that new life was injected into the fading American theater by the stage productions of WPA. With the cooperation of various city departments and under the sponsorship of the Crime Prevention Bureau of the Police Department, a number of city streets have been set aside for the use of the children of New York. Safe from the perils of crowded traffic thoroughfares, the youngsters are watchfully supervised by trained instructors removed from relief roles. Every kind of game you could possibly imagine is provided, and at some of the play streets, the children are given handicraft instruction. Civic authorities highly approve these play street projects, which keep the children away from the many dangers of unsupervised play. A new idea in bringing happiness to underprivileged children is the Toyery, which has been established as an experiment at the NYCHA Foundation. The Toyery works just like a lending library. A large supply of toys is kept on hand, and the youngsters are allowed to borrow one at a time. Hundreds of young children find their dreams brought to life in this novel enterprise. In cooperation with the Board of Education, a remedial program has been inaugurated. In this particular class, children who are unable to read fluently are instructed until they may be returned to their regular classes. In Long Island City, a kitchen is operated in which women who are the breadwinners for their families are given part-time employment. Here, school lunches are prepared for children of needy families and distributed to about 800 schools in New York City. Elsewhere, thousands of women have found work in sewing rooms, and hundreds of girls have enrolled in household training courses under WPA instruction. In 20-day nurseries located in 5 boroughs of the city, children of needy or working mothers are provided with hot meals, supervised play activities, medical attention, and excellent preschool training under competent WPA attendants. These nursery schools are part of a broad educational program in which WPA has helped millions of children and adults. In the knowledge that we are providing healthy bodies and sound minds for our future citizens, as well as in the more concrete construction projects, we find assurance that we are building a firm foundation for a bright future. Long after depression is forgotten, these permanent improvements will remain as part of a better New York.
So imagine that, right? Building railroads, building 3 lanes. It took us, 10 years to build the 2nd Avenue subway. They're building 40 miles of railroad, opening schools, fixing the library, building new sewer plants. And when they say taking people off the relief rolls, these are all people who were unemployed. So people who would have been on the scrap heap, would have been homeless, would have been prison, would have been whatever, are productively engaged, and you see a transformation. And today, people can barely imagine, building one thing. We've been building the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway for 37 years now. So, this, I think, is this Leibnizian conception, the best of all possible worlds, because, okay, we have a horrific crisis. We also have millions of people who need a purpose in their life, who need to be doing something. So why not pair the situations with the enormous magnitude of what needs to be done and the people who need something to do to make their life worthwhile, and put this together? But that has to be demanded. And we have to have a nation from which to do it. And unfortunately, the one last thing I wanted to add on the outrageous way in which these elections are controlled, and it really hit me this time, when you're running for federal office, there's a legal limit to what anyone can contribute. In the case of, it's $2,900 per election cycle any one person can donate. Now, they got around this with super PACs and ways of contributing dark money. But one thing that many people may not know is that the candidate can give unlimited amounts of money to their own campaign. So what does that mean? That means only the super rich can run for office because they can give unlimited amounts of money to their campaign. And that undoes the alleged leveling of the playing field. So that's the challenge before us. But I believe very strongly that we can pull the people together. I think we really can.
I'd like to say something here. I think we're also talking about inventing something new, because people think about political campaigns from the standpoint of parties. It may not be known, but the only president ever elected in the United States history that was not a member of a party was George Washington. And when he left office, he warned against the problem of parties, because they're going to corrupt the process. You can't get people who have a good idea just to speak about their idea and then work on their idea, because they got to be from one party or another. Now, you're running as an independent. So what we could do, maybe, is utilize the character. That's why I said may not be the structure of the way that they ran the whole district leader county committee kind of process, because that has its own built-in corruption in the way it's organized, but the concept behind it was very sound. The concept was that you had blocks or areas of very small areas, and you have representatives in these blocks, and you have a district leader, and the concept was that the needs that were there, and in this case, here's why this would be important. When you have a pandemic, people just really don't know what's happening. I mean, there's really seriously updates that you really do need. What happens if you have a mutated virus, or you have two mutated viruses? Well, maybe that changes what the actual medical requirements are. Maybe that changes what people need to do, or maybe it means that something much more intense has to be done in some area to defend it. How do people know that? Who communicates that to people? If you wait for the government to do that, that will never happen. It isn't happening. But if you organize your own committee so that your committee is able to make that available to people, see, that becomes very important. Take the thing with the teachers. I mean, we just had something said, and we're talking to someone who has had COVID twice. Well, what's that? Third time's the charm? I mean, what's going on here, right? See, so that needs to not only be known, that needs to be rejected as the reality for teachers in New York City. Well, how do you do that? Especially when the union is not doing what it needs to do. See? So what would be the form of that? Okay, well, that, we have the problem of not being able to assemble so easily, but maybe there is a way around certain of these things, especially if you look at some of the churches by some people relating to the schools. There may be some things that we can do. I don't want to get more explicit because I don't think it's right to do that in this venue. But I believe that your campaign, Diane, and the concept of an independent candidacy, this to me is why it's so important, is that the concept is, what are the principles we're trying to organize around? What are the conceptions? What are the crises which are civic crises right now, not that you're going to solve in November or after November, but need to be solved now, and then that qualifies somebody to be a whatever, a senator, a congressman, or this or that. This is a different concept, and I think that's what we should do. I don't think we really have a big choice because of the nature of the moment. We have an immediate crisis. So I just think for everybody that's listening, there's a campaign. We need petitioners. We do intend to make sure this is going to happen no matter what they did with their laws. Yeah, we're going to challenge that because that's obviously criminal. But at the same time, it's kind of like the Mississippi situation back in 63, 64. You have to be able to overcome an illegal circumstance, regardless of its injustice. You find a way to do that. Okay, that's what they did back down there with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which was basically they weren't allowed to be the Democratic Party. They had fulfilled all the requirements, but because of the segregationists down there, they wouldn't acknowledge the party. So then Fannie Lou Hamer and those guys, she was just a sharecropper. That's what she was. They formed the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and went to the Atlantic City Convention as an independent entity. This is the sort of same thing, I think, about this campaign. I think that's where we are. And clearly, we've heard some things tonight that require immediate redress. There are already crimes being committed against people that need redress. And since we do have a new mayor and all like that, there would be an avenue to put a certain amount of pressure, but only if some things were done now. And I think, that might be things to just discuss with others in a different way.
Great.
Can I just say something? I think that we're like just weeks away of petitioning, and petitioning is very hard. It's going to be even harder now, and so I think that I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, but I think we need to locate and make different little committees, community committees in the district. Look for people that can organize little, like 10 people here, 10 people there, 10 people there, and go on one issue over there, find out what issue in that place is the most needed to be addressed. Because like I said, everybody is not the same. So while we can get a lot of the maybe teachers together, we can organize them so that we know exactly what's happening with the teachers, and they can go out and talk about that, talk to other teachers. We need presidents of different developments to come out and say, well, this is what's happening, blah blah blah, and get petitions that way. But I think now is the time to make little groups within your district that you can depend that's going to go out there and get those petitions. Because if you wait any longer, it's just going to be harder. Especially February. It's cold. It's COVID. People are not feeling it. People are not going to want to knock on doors. They're going to want to know who's knocking on their doors. That's how I did my petitioning for city council. They knew who was knocking on their door. Everyone that went in their door, they knew that person. And I have 19 buildings. I have 5 people from the same building going to get signatures in each of those buildings. I didn't even have to go outside of my district. So, if you can organize it, something like that, if you need some help, I'm willing to help. I'm willing to help.
We need it. And
I'm
we need it
also
all. Great. Well, I will be calling on you, counting on you, and we need this across the state. We need it in every major city, and then we'll have to do something else in the rural areas where we figure this out, because we need the signatures in at least 13 of the now 26 congressional districts. So it has to be divided across the state.
You need organizers in all those districts, a real organizer that's going to move it. Because if that person can't excite people.
But I just
right
like to
now,
say one thing. I hear you.
Sure.
I think it's one thing, because of the character of this thing with coronavirus, because of the character of also what people are seeing also internationally, even like this whole thing in Afghanistan or other places where you see injustice. There's an awareness of injustice that's out there.
Sure.
And the concept is you're trying to start a movement against injustice. And people, you can find it everywhere, right? You can find it everywhere. And the whole point is, right, remember that thing? Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So you got it in all kinds of places. So it gives us the ability to actually make one unified movement, even as people are doing things in different areas slightly differently, but they know, well, wait, fundamentally, I'm fighting injustice, all right? And I'm with other people, right, doing it in different ways in different places.
Great. All right. Well, I think we should conclude. I really want to thank you all. Corinne. I'm delighted to have met you, even though we've only first talked, what, 3 days ago?
Yeah. You guys for having me.
Kareem's been around, don't think I know.
Thank you for having me and looking forward to come back. How about that?
Great.
And get more involved in what's going on.
Great,
Yes.
great.
Get some
And
teachers involved, honey.
Yes, we need to, because I was on the street days and days marching in the cold, marching for like 4 hours
Get
straight,
teachers involved.
over 4
and-
hours straight
Yeah.
marching in Manhattan, the Brooklyn Bridge. So I'm about being radical and helping to make change and not being in my house. I'm about
No,
that.
That's good.
okay, good. Well, we have a lot to do, so we'll reach lots of people, and we'll have some meetings with a lot of people on. We're going to have to do that. So thank
Right.
you so much. Thank you to
Very
everyone
happy.
who.
Everybody, let God
Okay.
drive us to the end of time right now. God has got to gear us right now, because that's all we have. He's the only one that says yes and the one that says no. So as long as we got him at the helm of this election, it's going to be good.
Very good. So thank you very
Right.
much. And to everyone, we'll be back next week.
With
Good
God's
night.
will.
Okay.